You're listening to international investment advisor Doug Goldstein on the Goldstein on Gelt show, the financial show where we'll talk about how you can make the most of your money. With all the confusing financial chatter bombarding you each and every day, Goldstein on Gelt will give you the practical information you want and need about living a financially stable life. Here's your host, money maven Doug Goldstein.
Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have on the show with us today law school professor Tamar Frankel, who is at Boston University Law School, and she's the author of a new book called The Ponzi Scheme Puzzle. Professor, it's a pleasure to have you.
It's good to be here.
I actually have a number of questions about Ponzi schemes and about your book, but maybe you could just start by giving us a definition of a Ponzi scheme.
All right. A Ponzi scheme is a scheme in which the con artist sells shares or some other securities to the public based on a story about the source of the money. Usually the money is very, very high. The returns are very high. But in fact, there is no enterprise. There's nothing except the money comes from other investors that invest later. And so at the beginning, the first group of investors gets quite a bit, sometimes 200%, and their investment. Then it goes down to 150 and 100. And finally, the largest number of investors get nothing because there is nothing to back them up.
And this is also what would be referred to as a pyramid scheme?
That is correct. That is because at the beginning, the investors receive quite a bit, but they're a small group. At the end, there's quite a bit of a large number of investors who get nothing.
So the next question is, why do people fall for Ponzi schemes?
Well, these schemes attract a certain type of person, but also all of us. First of all, they're too good. They are unique. In this case, they always offer an enormous return in a very short time. In addition, the stories, the source, the so-called source of the money, are very interesting. They are intriguing. People stop to listen. And they can be exciting. As one con artist said, it's the gold, that's not all of it. He said, it's the glitter, it's the neon. So some people are very excited about it. And in addition, it is given usually it's not offered to just everybody. It's offered to some. And that, of course, makes people feel unique. And the result is looking around, seeing that many people did make money, a lot of money in the market, in an hour, in 2 hours. So people say, why not I? Why is this not my chance to be also rich very soon?
So don't they remember the words that at least my mother taught me, and I would assume that their mothers taught them? If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is?
They don't remember that, and that's why some do. It's not that everybody falls for it, but a significant number of people fall for it. And at the same time, they focus on that instead of other things. Now, one thing is clear. These types of con artists pay on time and always pay until they stop. So that you had 8 banks in the United States who fell for a scheme of this sort to the tune of $1 billion, about $1 billion. And the reason was that the payments, one of the reasons was that the payments were made. Another, unfortunately, was that the investments were in India. And nobody went to India to check until the payments stopped. And then they found out there are no Indian businesses at all.
So that's similar to what happened with Bernard Madoff, because there were certainly many sophisticated investors and hedge funds who invested with him.
That is correct, but I would add also that people rely on other people, and that is efficient. Instead of checking for myself, why don't I just, sometimes I ask, sometimes I'm told, and so why not do that? And in addition, sometimes people follow in affinity groups. In Australia, there were a number of policemen that fell into such a scheme, and that was because they listened to their own and relied on their own instead of looking at the offerors.
Okay, we are talking with Professor Tamar Frankel, who teaches at Boston University Law School, and she's an expert in Ponzi scheme, having recently come out with a new book called The Ponzi Scheme Puzzle. She's been explaining to us what Ponzi schemes are and why people fall for them. Don't we rely on our governments to protect us from these sort of manipulations?
Well, there are limitations on protection. First of all, governments, at least in many countries, including the United States, and I think Israel as well, don't regulate businesses. And so if someone says, I have a business, the government does not regulate it. Not even a risky business. After all, IPOs, yes, are risky because they have no real public, at least, history, but governments require only disclosure. But to find out that the disclosure is fraudulent is a very difficult thing and not preventive. It can come out later. So there is a place for people to protect themselves, to ask the questions.
So it's up to people to ask their own questions, which I think is very important. In fact, it came up recently. I got a call. You know, my day job is that I'm a financial advisor. I work in Jerusalem as a financial planner, and I handle investments with clients. And the fellow called me up, and he said, Doug, I want you to sell a certain investment to all of your clients. Mm-hmm. So he was very pushy. He very, very much wanted to meet with me, and which was a bad sign already. And he told me the name of the company, and as we're talking, I looked it up, and ultimately I refused the meeting. I didn't want to meet with him because it looked to me like some kind of con. There was some sort of Ponzi scheme going on. In fact, when he called me, first he tried to get my secretary to meet. Then I went away on vacation. I came back a few weeks later, and I saw on the news that this company called Zeke Rewards was taken over by the government, and it was stopped by the government with $600 million taken from something like over 1,000 different people. It was
right.
I was so happy. I heard it just sounded to me so off that I wasn't even willing to meet the guy, but obviously a lot of people were.
It's not only that, but when they meet, the people are nice. They are very good salespeople. And one of the problems is that it is very hard to distinguish good salesmen from good salesmen who are selling fraud. It's very hard to distinguish a new business from a new business that has no business. And that is why they are very, very close to every legitimate arrangement. That is why it's so difficult to avoid them.
And especially for people who aren't professionals. I've always liked the expression that they say, I've never met a con man that I didn't like.
That is correct.
So what are the tools people could use to identify a con man?
First of all, they may look at themselves. I, for example, can drink wine and not become an alcoholic. But if I take one cigarette, I've had it for, I'll take 2 packs a day very, very soon. Knowing that, I don't touch cigarettes anymore. But I think the same applies to each of us. We have a tendency, if we get excited about the possibility of becoming a zillionaire in 2 hours, then we should never accept any invitation immediately. We should never accept freebies. We should never accept some free lunches. Why? Because that will induce us to then reciprocate. We shouldn't accept any stories that involve a secret, because that means I'm trusted and therefore I have to trust you. So there are some rules that one can give oneself if one knows that this is the tendency, and that is you never make a decision on the spot. You say, I'll think about it. You separate friendship from business. That is separate. And I think that in that case, you can then protect yourself, especially if you're smart and you understand what your tendencies are.
I think that one of the further things you can do when a deal does seem very good then is just to bring it to someone else, to a third party who you trust, who's not involved at all, not just getting advice from the salesman, but from your own financial advisors or lawyers who can look at the deal too.
I couldn't agree more.
So you wrote this book about Ponzi schemes. What was your goal? What did you want readers to take away from it?
I started really because I was very curious. And my interest, I'm teaching about people who hold other people's money. And that involves trust. And so I've written and taught about trust. But then one person said to me, you're dealing with trust. Why don't you deal also with people who mimic trust? And I'm not a journalist. I didn't go to look to try and talk to people. But I went to Lexis, which is my source, LexisNexis, and I punched Ponzi schemes. And I was flabbergasted. There were hundreds of these cases going way back to the 1800s.
To Ponzi himself?
I'm sorry?
To Ponzi himself.
Yes, but Ponzi is only in 1800, which is more before Ponzi. In 1884, a former president of the United States, Ulysses Grant, fell for such a scheme.
Oh no.
And so then I began to look at patterns. I said to myself, what are the patterns? And that is what came about. And so I wanted to write the book because I wanted to share what I found with people who are interested in the same thing. And then I asked, how can we protect ourselves? And I came to the conclusion that warnings are not sufficient. And self-knowledge and really asking people who know is a better way.
Okay, that sounds like very good advice and a very important book for people to read, especially if they're people who are, as you said, always looking for a way to get rich quick. We've been talking to Professor Tamar Frankel at the Boston University Law School. We're just about done, Professor, but in the last few seconds, how can people learn more about your work?
Well, they can buy the book, although I'm not a good salesperson, but if they order it on Amazon.com, they can get it, and I hope the price won't be very high.
Okay. Professor Tamar Frankel, thanks so much for your time.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.